Hello, and welcome to this, episode 209 of Frame and Reference. You're about to drop into a conversation between me, Kenny McMillan, and my guest Nicola Daley, BSC ACS, DP of The Handmaid's Tale. Enjoy. Yeah, I find that all the Australian DPs you're Australian, right?
I'm British by birth, but I lived in Australia for many, many years. I consider myself half-half.
Gotcha. The ACS threw me off, but I guess we do have an American BSC, rather.
Yeah, BSC, ACS, yeah.
Yeah.
So it's, basically I have two passports, so I just think of myself as Aussie and British.
Yeah. But I find everyone who came up, or at least has worked in Australia for a long time, seems to have a certain workman-like ethic that I don't see with a lot of other I don't know what you call them, not nationalities, but just localities. There seems to be a very we'll just get it done. Talking to all the people who worked on Lord of the Rings down to the production designer, it was just we had to do it, so we did it. There was not, there wasn't a lot of falderall about it.
Yeah, it's a very can-do place. I mean, I came up there in the film industry because I was 22 when I moved there. I lived there when I was a kid, and my dad is from Kent in England. But if you met him, you would just think Aussie because he's been there 40 years or something. So he's just full-on Australian. But I went back. I lived in Nottingham with my mom, and then when I was 22, I went back to Sydney, and I was going to be 3 years maybe, and I stayed 15 years. So I started in the film industry there. Yeah. So, but you're right. You're absolutely right. That attitude is it's very positive. It's very can-do. I remember John Seal came to give us a talk at film school, and he just sat there and basically just told stories for about 2 hours, which we were all just in awe of, because he's wonderful. But what you realized afterwards, and I had this massive penny drop moment, I think, was that he was just so positive and so can-do that he was he's talking about, I forget which film he's talking about, but they were really high, and then the director was under the tent going, higher, we need the shot higher. So they were moving ceiling tiles and poking the camera up, and what you realized after him telling you all those stories was there was solutions, no problems for him. Mm-hmm. It was just, how do you get around doing something? How do you try and do the best you can for the director and say yes? And I walked out of that seminar and was just no wonder obviously gets hired again and again and again because he's so talented, but no wonder directors love him, because he was just he'd pick up a broom and start sweeping, and he's a real hands-on, let's all do it together, teamwork kind of guy.
Yeah. Do you ever get handed those situations even now where it's just thinking about that, where it's they, maybe I work on a much smaller budget, obviously, than you tend to do these days. But, it'll be the director will go, or production will go oh, we definitely wouldn't, we're not going to do that. So don't worry about that. Gimbal, whatever,
Yeah.
And then 10 minutes into the shoot, they're so what if we did want to do that?
Yeah.
Do you ever run into that? And if so, how do you stop from going nope, it's a Barbie. Not today, buddy.
That's interesting, because the film I'm working on at the minute is quite low budget. So there's a lot of we've only got 25 days. It's pretty tight, 10-hour days, no overtime, not even a night shoot. Too expensive to do a night shoot. So it's
nice on the sleep schedule.
That's it, yeah. So it's a lot of oh, we could do that. I think it's always how you couch it with the argument and who you're talking to. Mm-hmm. I always think of it as psychology. So it's how you present your argument. And then if you can't do, a massive crane shot or whatever because you haven't got the money, then how could you do it otherwise? Or or maybe drilling down into what the director actually wants story-wise, and then thinking up another way that you could do it. We had one recently on this film. We wanted the director mentioned a body rig, like Requiem for a Dream kind of, and we just can't afford any extra equipment because that would be the body rig, which isn't that expensive, but then you need a little camera, kind of an free and and all the onboard recording and all that, and we just don't have the money to do it. And so I thought I can't just go to him and say we can't do it, although he knows how tight the budget is, because he's also a producer, bless him, so he knows very well.
Yeah.
But I said, well, we could do, if we can't do Requiem for a Dream, maybe we could do the right thing and put him on a dory dolly and attach to the real dolly and like float her down the catwalk. And he was like, oh, okay. Because I said we can't afford the extra equipment. So he went away and thought about it and was like, yeah, okay, I think that's a good compromise. So I think it's about kind of presenting some options instead of just going, nope, and shrugging your shoulders.
Yeah. Well, and you're going to have to get ready for if people do interviews about that film. So I saw a big Spike Lee influence in this film. You're like, yeah, totally.
Exactly. And then you just pretend it was what you planned all along. Yeah.
Right. Yeah. We watched his whole, I almost said filmography.
Yeah.
Was that John Seal interview? Or like talk, was that, I had heard you in a separate thing talking about like how he's talking about like 2 ways to go and get into the film industry. It was like working your way up and working at a rental house.
Yeah, that was Michael Saracen, actually. Michael Saracen, BSC, who shot like all sorts of things, including Dawn of the Planet of the Apes and so many brilliant films. Yeah. I met him when I was 21, I think, and I'd gone to America and done a year abroad at the University of California in Santa Cruz, and they had film cameras and non-linear editing, and we were splicing and we were making documentaries, and it's kind of where I discovered that I wanted to be a cinematographer because I shot, I think, 5 short films, and I was like, is this a job? I hope this is a job, this is what I want to do for the rest of my life. So then I went back to London and then I was like, I had no idea. I didn't know anyone in the film industry. And I had no idea how to get in. And I knew someone that knew him, whose dad knew him or something. Right. And so I managed to get coffee with him. And he said to me, yeah, there's 2 ways you can get into the industry. Either you work your way up the camera department or you work in a camera rental house. So when I went to Sydney, it was a bit easier to get into the film industry in Sydney rather than London, was no one would answer your calls. No one would answer your emails, nothing. So Sydney was a little bit easier. They answered you. So I ended up getting a job at Lee Mack, which is a rental house, kind of the rival to Panavision.
And a comedian.
And a what? Sorry?
And a comedian. There's a comedian named Lee Mack.
Yes, that's true. Yeah. It was actually, I think the owner used to smoke Camels, so it was Camel backwards.
Oh, that's hilarious.
Yeah. That was a cinematographer called John Bowring. He's not with us anymore, but he shot the Paul Hogan show. So he'd put, Paul Hogan had asked him to put money into this small film he was making called Crocodile Dundee, which he did and made a lot of money. So he was able to open a rental house in Sydney and Melbourne with all cameras. And so I started on reception in the Sydney office. So it was actually, Michael was right, because it was actually a really good place to start because you learned all the equipment, and everybody that came in, obviously you met loads of focus pullers, cinematographers, and then I went to the technical side, so I did prep. So I took the cameras apart and put them back together and checked everything, and so it was it was a brilliant place to learn.
How do you stand out in an environment like that? Because I imagine, at least at the rental house next to my house here, plenty of people are in there, and also it's LA, so it's really crowded. But wide-eyed and bushy-tailed, like this is temporary. I swear to God, I'm not a rental house guy. I'm a I'm budding, or whatever.
I'm a cinematographer. Yeah.
Yeah.
John he was pretty hardcore. He used to make us learn all the technical things, and it was when HD was coming in.
Mm.
So Sony and Panasonic would come and give us talks on, you know, this new exciting format, 1080 by, it was all very, the Olympics, I remember the Sydney Olympics were on, so it was very kind of, ooh, HD, which is now kind of funny considering it's 6K and 8K and all that. But he would like make us learn all the technical stuff. And then I kind of was a bit cheeky and I took all my sick days that I had and shot short films and music videos with no money. And we used to go around like all the commercial houses and get short ends that they just had in the fridge that they didn't want anymore and shoot shorts and yeah, basically shot anything. Anybody had anything, it was like, I'll shoot that.
I find today that like when you tell, because I try to take on an educational bent with all of my various dealings with other film, you end up talking to people and they hear this, or I write for this website and stuff. I find that the advice like, oh, just go shoot something usually gets followed up with like literally just use your phone, because you having to find a 16 or 35 camera, finding short ends, finding lights, that's expensive. Phone is free. And I think the hidden advice is always your first stuff is going to suck.
Yeah.
So you got to keep shooting till it doesn't suck, and you might as well not spend money on the suck stuff.
Yeah.
Like, why rent an Alexa for suck?
Exactly. Yeah. Exactly. And the more shorts you do, the more you learn, don't you? I mean, I remember when I started at AFTRS, that's the Australian Film School in Sydney. We did documentaries. We started with documentaries, and they used to go make us shoot anything, on a Z1P. It must have been go and shoot your family Sunday lunch dinner that mum's cooked, and get all the shots and then edit it together. It was like shoot anything that's happening and go, because then you'll learn how to edit and then you'll learn how to shoot better.
Yeah. Well, and I'm smiling just because you said that, because again, I'm just having an argument with an anonymous film student in my head where they're like, well, how are you supposed to make dinner look good? And I'm like, well, if you look over here, I've got Babette's Feast.
Yeah.
We can talk about making meals look good.
Yeah.
Or like any anime, to be honest. But
yes. Yeah.
There's ways to shoot anything.
Yeah, definitely. It was, I must have been 22, 23. I didn't really know what I was doing. I was just shooting stuff. I remember being very frustrated about lighting, and then when I went to film school, knowing that it was interesting, because then obviously they learnt you as a cinematographer. They taught you, all the basics of everything. So operating, lighting, and then you realize that your instincts were good, but then then you were learning the techniques and how to do, how to soften the light, how to shape the light, all the things that I was kind of like fumbling around in the dark in short films with two redheads and a blondie or something before,
Right.
And you suddenly realize, oh, okay, a silk, an 8x8 silk. Wow, that changes everything. It was like, it was a very steep learning curve, film school, but it was an amazing place. It was just 2 years, and it's an MA basically, but they just took 4 students in every discipline. So there was very few students, and then you all got into groups and made 4 films. And there was documentaries, then 16, Super 16, then 35 mils in the second year, and then visual effects and all sorts. So it was actually brilliant place. And then people like John Seal, Peter James, Andrew Lesney, who's not with us anymore, unfortunately, they all came in and gave like the most amazing classes.
Yeah.
So it was a privilege.
That sounds very AFI adjacent.
Yeah. Yeah. They've changed it a bit now, but when I went, and people like Dion Beebe have gone through that school, and so
he's decent.
Yeah. So it was a great school.
Do you find yourself excited by the technical side of things, or did you? Because I know, like, I certainly, as a giant nerd, was far more interested in. I learned much later, like props and special effects, and then I just figured, oh, cinematography. Like in my brain as a student, I was like, cinematography must be close. So then I just started
Yeah.
doing, and then of course just straight into camera tech and stuff. But eventually, I figured out how to learn art. Do you still find yourself excited by tech at all?
I do. I mean, I'm much more interested in storytelling as an art form and the art of lighting, which I think I learn about every single project. Um, I guess I have a technical background because I learned all the camera, that was kind of the first thing I learned.
Yeah.
Lenses and cameras and we had all sorts of things. So it's kind of I like it because I love cinematography, the fact that it's a craft and a science and an art all together. Um,
Oh,
but I think the thing that really gets me is the storytelling side.
well, and I don't know why I never thought about this, but you saying those three together is like, oh, those are like the science of it. It's not like even well, maybe costumes department's not the best example because there's new textiles and crazy shit you can do, but like writing, for instance, isn't necessarily like things don't change in that art form. You're stuck there. But having like the science part of it now, just unlocked. I'm like, oh, that is something I'm really interested in, but I never thought of it as like, oh, it is. I guess it is science, even though it's the Academy of Arts and Sciences. For some reason, I just
Yeah,
thought it was like was a word. You know how you hear a word and it just
yeah,
attaches itself to a meaning and you don't think about the word ever?
yeah, yeah, yeah. It's funny because when I was at school, which is a while ago now, they make you do one of those terrible sort of psychological tests to see,
Right.
and there's this sort of graph that's like this, and this, if you're in this quadrant, you're good at science, and if you're in here, you're a journalist, or if you're down here, you're an architect, or whatever it is. And they made us all do one of these tests, and then they call you in for the results, and then they say, you could go do this. And so she took me in the office and she said, right, you are right in the middle of this cross. So what do you
Sleep
want to
under a
do?
bridge. Yeah, we don't got nothing for you.
And she was kind of surprised, and then she didn't really know what to tell me. So it was, yeah. So I think cinematography probably fits that.
It's yeah, I'm gonna have to think on that because that's an exciting thing to learn about myself just now. Because I've always loved, new, not just new technology as a toy, but like the actual science, like especially with color grading becoming more accessible at my level and stuff, learning about like the imaging pipeline and stuff, and like what down to like photons, just like that
Yes.
physics is very exciting, not
Yeah.
exciting in the such a sense, but yeah, anyway. um but to your
I
point about
think,
lighting, oh, go ahead.
I think, Kenny, I sort of nerd out more on the psychology of things. So,
Sure.
like I'm a huge color fan. So this the not necessarily the science of it, but the psychology of how colors affect people and what a blue room does to you, or if you eat off a blue bowl, you eat less. Stuff
Yeah.
like that. I really get a kick out of that stuff.
There's a book, I have it somewhere. It's like, if it's called like, if it's purple, someone's gonna die or something
Yes.
like that. Still haven't read it, but I do
Yeah.
have the book. But yeah, that is fun. I mean, that's kind of like a manipulative tactic that we all agree to be part of.
Mm.
That is kind of a fun way to think of what you're doing, is like it next to lighting. Like, yeah, I think color. Do you just go off vibes, or are you actually studying like the psych? You must be studying the psychology of color.
Yeah, I mean, I read nerdy color books about. I think Joseph Olber's had an old one about. I forget what the name of the title of that book is now, but it's all about those color. Um, sort of exercises that you do, you know, where you look at something and for ages, and then you look at a white sheet of paper and your eye does the inverse, um, and how your eye actually works. And then you take all that into consideration, and then painting, and then the history of painting, and how, you know, people, you know, impressionisms and how pointillism worked, and how that color vibrating against each other worked. And then the psychology of that your eye is actually attached to your brain. So it's not just, you know, if I said to you green, you know, you would imagine a different green than I probably would. And how do we ever know that we think the same green? And then your upbringing influences how you see green. And then, yeah, or if it's red, you know, if you're from China, then you would have a totally different idea of what red means in your culture as opposed to maybe the indigenous Australians. So, like, all that put together for the psychology of color, and then applying that to how you tell a story, you know, I love sort of color journeys of films. So when I read a script, I often think, you know, a bit like, Storaro's the master of this, right? So, you know, Apocalypse Now, that color journey throughout that film is just astounding. And the way he's kind of, you know, if you look at all the images on shot deck, you know, through, and you can see what he's doing. The same with The Conformist, you know, that blue,
Love
Paris. Yes.
that
Yeah.
film. Seeing that, like when I started actually trying to like focus on cinematography as an art form, and really trying to get a bearing on like, because I grew up just watching the fun ones, you know, and I was very entranced by the fun ones. And so I was like, I need to go back and watch like what people consider to be incredible films. And somehow I got that on Blu-ray. And like 10 minutes in, I'm like, when was this made? Like 19, what do you mean 1969? Like it looks like it was shot yesterday.
Yeah. It's beautiful. It's beautiful. In fact, at AFTRS in Sydney, one of the first things they make you do is watch a 35mm print of The Conformist.
Really?
And I don't think any of us, there was only 4 of us in the class, but I don't think we'd ever seen it. And we sat there and just went, what? I'm sorry. You know, he did what?
Yeah.
You know, it's just beautiful.
Well,
So I think, go on.
That and Lay Samurai both have like very modern lighting sensibilities, I felt.
Yeah.
Because like a lot, and maybe it was just because at the time I feel like there was a lot of indie film coming out in the US. And so everything was just like kind of hard blasted handheld and stuff. And there was just a lot more like considered larger sources in those films. I'm like, I didn't know you could do that back then. Like smart people.
Yeah. So I think Storaro is a big influence on me. I love his psychology of, and obviously he's written huge books on it, and you know, what each color means to him and what it represents and stuff. So I'm a big fan of all that stuff.
Well, getting handed a project like Handmaid's Tale probably was joy, because that's just like all color, all color all day.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, I did say when I went for my interview, because I did season 5 and 6, and I did say in my interview, you know, I thought it had gone a bit monochrome. And so I wanted to sort of bring back the color, because she'd sort of, spoiler alert, but she'd escaped, you know, Gilead by that point. So she was a bit more in the real world. And so I said to Elizabeth Moss, who was interviewing me, you know, I want to bring the color back in. And she was like, yeah, let's do that. So I obviously said the right thing because I got the job. So
do you find, this is a larger question, but it probably applies to Handmaid's Tale, but like there does seem to be a sort of a public backlash to the monochronicity, that's a word, sure, of I think mostly television. I don't know if I've seen films just suddenly become very like tamped down, but certainly in television you do see a lot of that. Oh, you shot Halo, didn't you?
Yes, the finale of season 2.
I enjoyed that show, but I was kind of bummed it didn't get picked up. But in my head, for some reason, Halo popped up in my head, that like that was a very. But then again, it's action film and stuff. But do you find there was a technical reason for that? Was it people getting too excited about what they could do in the grade, or like what, or even like what made Handmaid's Tale start to? It was just the subject matter.
I think it was because she'd come out of Gilead, and it was it's a bit more real world locations rather than the Gilead sort of beautiful. They had such beautiful sets in like season 1 and 2 with all the wallpaper in the old commanders' houses, and so I think when they got out, it was a bit kind of like, whereas I wanted to sort of bring that back. And then Elizabeth always said the beams of light were about, you're trapped inside. You can't go outside, and outside is beautiful, So Colin Watkinson had done a beautiful job of obviously setting that series up. So that motif of, but then I think maybe in Canada they said we won't have any, mole beams coming through the windows. And then Lizzie said to me, well, it's kind of like her trauma, that the beam of light is her trauma, and she's still got lots and lots of trauma. So it's the beams of light should still be in Canada. They're not, they shouldn't have gone anywhere. So it made perfect sense then that it's, because Handmaids is all absolutely rooted in June's experience. And in fact, when I started, they said to me, Bruce said, if you just shoot June, what she's thinking, and then what she sees and how she experiences the scene, then you've shot the show. So because we shoot most of those episodes in 10 days. So yeah.
Good job.
It's pretty quick. So I mean, if you do an episode 1 or the last episode of a season, you get maybe 12 days. But if you're doing the middle ones, you get 10 days. So the way that they get to shoot that show to be beautiful, and you shoot it in a short amount of time, is we don't shoot everybody's experience of every shot, all the coverage, Right. They encourage you to shoot the storytelling underlying feeling of the subtext of the scene. And that's why it's so good. That's why it's so bold and brilliant, I think.
Well, I feel like that comes, any project is like, or it's even the same idea of like having restraint, if you want to think of it that way, usually makes good creative choices. But shot selection, right? Like being in having intent with all you're doing, and because if you had 40 days per episode and you were just like, yeah, hose it down, like even if the editor is like, oh, thank God, I think you would end up having uninspired shots.
Yes. Well, I think you end up, and I think as cinematographers, we've all been there, because there's so many different directors. You work with all sorts of different directors, and sometimes you end up trying to get like a shopping list of shots. Now we're going to do the over the shoulder, then we're going to do the mid shot, then we're going to do the close up, and I get really bored with that. And I know Elizabeth does too, and so we share that. We get on very well, and so we share that sort of, let's think of some other way that we can do this really interesting thing, and let's think. And that's why I think we both really love prep too, because I think I really like to be prepared, and not so that I can't throw it away on the day and the actors do something else, and then you go, oh, actually, they're going to do this, so we need to pivot and do this. But I think you have to be prepared, and you have to have done that hard work. And it is kind of hard work sitting in an office, not even in location, trying to come up with all those shots. That's hard brain work. But I think you have to do that. And it's taken me nearly 20 years to work this out, is because, and I've been on shows where you just go, oh, this is the plot, right? We just make it up on the day. And I never do my best work like that, because I just fall back on cliched ideas.
Right.
Whereas if I can get rid of those cliched ideas in prep, then I can really get to the heart of, what is this scene really about, and where should the camera be? Because there's a million places you could put the camera, but why do you put it there specifically?
This isn't specifically related, but it's the same idea. As I became a much better um I don't know, hang is maybe the best, or like I hang out around, or I run a stand-up comedy show, so I'm always around comics. And I learned really fast that the best way to like make friends, this is a networking tip for anyone listening, is to, stand in a circle and just yes and people's stupid jokes. Comedians have good jokes, but the average person, they're not that great. But if you just let them riff, they feel good. But the thing I've learned is, to your point, your first instinct of a joke is usually terrible. It's like the
Yeah.
first pancake idea. So, someone has a name that's, don't say the first thing because they've heard it a million times,
Mm.
Um, but that's so smart. Like, get enough time in prep and you can just like throw all those first pancakes out. Because
Yeah.
and even if you think it's a good idea, it never is. It never is.
No. And I remember on season 5, I think Lizzie and I were doing the last episode of season 5, and she's in like nearly all the scenes. So
Right.
you go to her trailer, and it was kind of funny for me because she's wearing the Handmaid's outfit, and we're sitting doing the shots for, she's in episode 8, we're doing the shots for 10. And I always remember this. She said to me, we'd done a first pass, and she said, this is not right.
Mhm.
These are not what the shots should be. And I was like, wow, she instinctively knows. She's such a good storyteller. She knows. And so we sat down, we threw it in the bin, and we started again. And I just thought that was so smart of her. She's got those sort of storytelling instincts. I think because she's such a good actress that she comes from inside the scene, so it makes her a very, very good director. But we kind of have the same sensibilities. So you know, we both get bored. And we both know that if we're just writing down wide shot, close up, then it's probably time to go get a cup of coffee, you know, because the brain's gone to mush or something.
How do you not do wide shot, close up
Mm.
without just being different for different sake? How do you know when maybe it is just time for a close up?
Yeah. And sometimes you need those close-ups because it's all about the performances. And actually the film I'm just about to start, I've been thinking a lot to myself. We've got a brilliant cast, and sometimes you just have to step back and go, they just have to you just have to cover what they're doing because it's going to be brilliant. But I think you stop it by saying, I always say to Lizzie, what is the point of this scene? What is this scene really about? And the amazing thing about the writing in Handmaids, which is sort of another reason it's a joy to work on, is the writing. I think Bruce said it always lies. So people are lying a lot, and there's always some sort of text, and then there's something really going on underneath. So if you can work out what the subtext is, and then, who's got the power, who's, putting their power over someone else, and then you're sort of halfway to figuring out, where the camera should be.
Right. It's the misdirection of it. The
Yeah.
because the thing that I'm really loving right now in my sort of cinematography journey is like you're saying, like, what do you, the psychology, the sort of feeling of where you put the camera, which I know you learn in like film school, but I think I didn't quite like understand what that meant until recently, which was just like, I think I used to try to over intellectualize. When you're saying like, oh, blue bowl makes you less hungry, I used to think that like, oh, put camera here, make people look powerful, and it's like,
Yeah.
not always. It depends.
Yeah.
And you have to start trusting how things make you feel like how you feel, which is very vulnerable, or can be. But yeah, having like a known subtext, it's like, where you put the camera, it can tell you which track you're on, whether the truth telling track or the lie track. Like I love that idea.
And sometimes you want to play against, like Clockwork Orange with the music. Sometimes you want to play against the scene, and sometimes you want to play with the scene. So, in a way, cinematography is like music, you know.
Hey,
I mean, the scene that Elizabeth and I always talk about, which is I think our joint favorite, is in season 5, and it's Esther and Janine sitting on the bed in the red center, and um, and we sat in an office, we drew it out, and you know, and basically what we worked out was that they're slowly talking, but the point of the scene is that it changes halfway. So you think they're friends, but then they're not friends, and they've both been eating chocolate, and then it's revealed that Esther poisoned the chocolate with rat poison, and you know, and then they spit out the poison, and then it goes to hell. And I think that's Lizzie and I's both favorite shot is we do a really slow crane in, and then when the scene switches, I mean, this is very simple. We cross the line, and then we push in on Esther, who's eating the chocolates, and then the chocolates had a blood capsule in them.
oh, smart.
So we had to test all this and get the props
Right.
mistress to build the chocolates with the blood capsule in, and she bites it, and then she starts coughing, and then it starts cutting, and it goes to handheld. And Lizzie and I think we talk about that now, where we watch that scene and we go, oh, we love that, because it feels instinctively, it feels like exactly the right shot for that scene. And I think when that's what gets me is when it works. You have the idea in a sterile office, and then it works, and you know in your gut and in your brain that it's the perfect storytelling camera move, or you know, light could be a lighting change or something for that story moment.
Mm.
Then I get really excited then.
Well, it's like, you know, every shot in some way is a gamble, and having your gamble pay off always feels good.
Yeah,
We've built
exactly.
cities to that feeling.
Yeah, and sometimes it doesn't work either. You
Right.
know, there's plenty of things that don't work. But
I saw that.
sometimes you put the lens on and you realize your gut tells you it's the wrong lens.
Mhm.
Now, I don't really know what that is. I'm still trying to figure out what that is, except for gut instinct and experience. But
If I had to guess, again, over intellectualizing everything, it's a potentially a lack or too much information. Like the second you put it on, you're like, I know too much and I need to know less, or I don't know enough and I need to know more. You
yeah,
know, that would be my guess. But I've had the same. That's why I try not to use. I mean, everyone has this, but like, I try not to use zooms, and if I am using zooms, I'll usually just not touch it. Like I'll put it wherever it's going to live, and I'm like, you know what? Today that's a 24. I'm
yeah.
going to move the just because like you get too finicky and.
I remember years ago I saw a short film, and it was Adam Arkapour, who's just
Oh,
an amazing
phenomenal.
Australian cinematographer, and he'd shot the whole short film on a 50
Oh,
mm.
not Autumn. Adam.
Adam,
Oh,
yeah, Adam was Australian, so he was in Melbourne based,
gotcha.
but he'd shot a whole short film on one lens, you know, and I remember thinking, what a great idea that is. What a great exercise that is, even, you know, if you boil it down to an exercise,
Yeah.
to kind of twist your brain into thinking, right, I've only got this camera and a 50 mm lens. What am I going to do?
Yeah. I think it works. I mean, it maybe. No, yeah, just do that. I was gonna say maybe give yourself a safety wide, but then it's not an exercise.
Yeah.
You know, then it's not. If you have an emergency shoot, you're not gonna commit. You know, parachute. You're not
Yeah.
gonna commit. I did.
Sometimes those constraints of, you know, money or whatever it is, budget, or sometimes I don't know, sometimes they can help you think, you know, if you don't have every lens in the box and you don't have every light you can possibly think of, then sometimes that can help you think creatively sometimes, I think.
That was actually something I was going to bring up and I forgot. When you were talking about how much you love color and stuff, the advent of LED must have been a blessing and a curse, because now, like we're saying, you have every gel you could possibly come up with.
Yeah.
I was wondering if you had like a sort of an example or something of where that was really helpful, and maybe where that gave you decision paralysis or something. Like, did you just start throwing color at everything, or were you able to stay kind of uh, what do you call it, disciplined?
I think I like to, because I'm such a planner and a prepper, I think I like to actually plan the colors before I get there. So I'm not just dialing sort of things. So I really like to sort of think about it and think what I'm gonna use before I get there. Like with Pincushion, which was a very low budget £1 million British film I did when I came back from Australia to England. There was sort of like there were all these fantasy sequences that were in the girl's head, who was the main character, and she was being bullied. So it's kind of like an idealized kind of life. So I sort of did that with diffusion filters and made more halation, but then with color. So there was like this sort of aquamarine color, and it went through, and it was sort of, in the background or whatever, but or maybe spilling out of a door in the school or something like that. But it tied them all together. So it's kind of color in a thematic way as well.
Right.
Which I kind of love to think about those puzzles. They're kind of like jigsaws to me, I think.
Yeah. I did see Liz Moss called you the Queen of Darkness. You basically you're the Gordon Willis. You got a Gordon Willis compliment.
That's a pretty big compliment. That's pretty big.
Yeah. How do you, I want to know what, if you know what specifically spurred her, like if there was if that was just working with you for a long time, or if there was like a specific thing where she was like, all right, this lady knows what's up. And then two, how do you achieve that look without just underexposing? What did, not to say you're copying Gordon Willis, whatever, obviously, but like what have you learned to get there, to get that rich, great cinematic look without just being dark for dark's sake?
Mm. It's a good question. I actually hate murky. I hate murky. So when I moved back from Sydney to London, I also almost like had to start again because I didn't really have the context I had in Australia. And so it was actually really good for me. I had to have a lot of coffees with people, but I also sat down and really thought about what I love as images. And I started to sort of collect all these images because I was like, well, who am I as an artist? Those creative sort of crisis that you have. And
what do I think my reel? Yeah.
And what I realized is that I love contrast. I think of contrast as a character in whatever I'm doing. So
interesting.
So to me, when I do dark, I also do a highlight, because I don't think dark is dark unless you've got a white reference in there. It's a bit like all those, beautiful Magnum photos, the famous ones from throughout the years, in black and white. They're not, you've got all that beautiful velvet black, but only because you've got a lamp on in the background or whatever. And that's how I think of color as well. That's that color contrast. So your eye will just get used to a whole scene in a submarine, say, that's red because the emergency lights are going off, But your eye is so clever. This is the thing. It's so smart that it just gets used to it. So how do you make the red redder? And that's
light bulb.
Yeah. White light
random
in the
lamp,
or blue in the background, whatever it is. So I think thinking about that kind of ties us back to that psychology of color. But I think, with the dark thing, I'm just not a big fan of murky, so I really don't like. But then I think it's taken me a long time to work out night lighting. I think it's, for
Mm.
me, it's been tough to do it properly. I've done a lot of things where I've been like, that's not moonlight, you know.
Right.
I mean, obviously we're all very picky of our own work, but um, I was like, that moonlight's too hard, you know, that's got to be softer. And it's not that color, it's like a silvery, greeny, bluey, complicated color. You know, I
But
think if you've got a room full of cinematographers, you could probably talk for hours about what is moonlight.
oh,
You know,
I actually do ask most people, like, especially if it's like a moon or a night heavy show, I'll ask, because the funny thing is, technically, Moonlight is hard as hell and still roughly 5,600,
yeah,
you know, because it's just the sun bounced off. And so, and it's still relatively the same size, like, you know, and so, but we all have this idea that I think is built in film
yes,
of what nighttime is, and we're all correct. And I just
yeah,
love that about like
yeah,
night shoots. It's the most expressive version of cinematography, in my opinion, because it's all incorrect and correct.
yes. And a very good friend of mine who's a very smart man and owns the Lightbridge company.
Oh yeah.
Uh, so they make those beautiful reflectors. He and I were talking about this the other night, and he said he tried AI and he put in, give me an image of a wood not lit by moonlight. And the AI, whatever program he was in, couldn't do it
Huh.
because only I guess the proliferation of images on the, you know, that are out there are woods lit by moonlight.
Like a woods.
Yeah,
I
like a
thought you meant like a piece of wood,
no,
or
like
like a forest.
yeah, he put in forest not lit by moonlight.
Interesting.
The computer had a meltdown. And that's because, yeah, you're absolutely right, because the norm is, oh, we're doing a scene in a forest at night. Here's the overhead soft moonlight.
Yeah. Or you do a great escape and just hit it with like a fucking 20K or whatever and call it a day.
Yeah.
I
Yeah.
was watching that, like, I think it was in like Christmas or whatever, doesn't matter. But like, I was just like, when they're climbing out of the ground, I was like,
Yeah.
that's daylight. What are you talking about? Like, it's not even close. Then it's somehow a spotlight comes through and you're like, that's incredible. I don't know how you got that. Oh, that's what I was gonna say about contrast. That just reminded me about contrast. How do you, if you're shooting a night scene or whatever, or you're shooting really any scene, and you're working with contrast, how do you keep the shadow areas snappy without getting murky? Is it just that you have to get a sensor that is able to resolve in that toe area, or are you lighting in such a way that maybe printing down or whatever? Like, how do you keep that area crisp?
I think, yeah, I think I mean, so many of the cameras nowadays are so good. You know, the latitude's, you know, insane. So I think we used to do, you know, latitude tests on every new camera all the time. And now we don't really do them because, you know, I was thinking about this the other day because this new, the camera I'm shooting this new film on is the Sony Venice 2. And I was thinking, oh yeah, normally we would have done all those latitude tests. And now we just go, oh, it's got 16 stops. You know, here we go. Let's just, yeah, do some lens tests, pick the lenses and do some costume tests and off we go. So, so I think, you know, it's amazing what cameras do now. I think it's all about your lighting ratios, isn't it? I think it's all about knowing which, you know, the zone system is how I learned, you know, the Ansel Adams zone system. So knowing
There's my Ansel Adams.
exactly, there you go, there you go. So it's all about thinking about like how, and you know, and that's that thing I was talking about. The best images have that zone. They have all the zones really. So if you let that go to black, then this one, you know, maybe the window's two stops under and then the lamp is on in the very background and that's two stops over. It's kind of composing the whole thing as like an orchestra of light, I think.
Yeah. Well, and to your earlier points about contrast being interesting, I was shooting a documentary with a first time director, but he's worked on a bunch of stuff. But this is the first time it's been like a solo it's literally just me and him, very low budget. And it's a subject that's like close to him. And he was asking, like, halfway through the interview, we'd traveled across the world to shoot this thing. And he's like, so how do I write this? And I was like, why are you asking me? Like, but I came up with everything is contrast.
Mm-hmm.
Like if you just say one thing about this subject, it will not be interesting. We need to have at least two things,
Yeah.
and I just the more and more I thought about that, I was like, literally everything is in filmmaking is contrast. How do I make it interesting? There has to be a counterpoint. If it's
Yes.
just point, no interest.
Yeah.
Counterpoint, interest. Same thing with music, as you were saying.
Yeah. That's very true. That's very true. And that's kind of tying us back to those sunbeams in, those more beams coming through the windows in Handmaids. That's the counterpoint. It's like she's in this awful situation where she's in prison, and yet it's beautiful.
Yeah.
That horrible, awful beauty, like a painting that you can't, sort of take your eyes off.
We've been talking a lot about like the artwork and stuff, but I'm also interested in the marketing side, I suppose, because I'm again, still coming up in my career, and then there's an element of salesmanship. And I had seen in an interview that like your reels stayed the same, and then the second you got like Netflix, they were like, "Oh yeah, no, you're good." Do you find that like that's kind of the world we're operating in now as DPs? Is like you need to be sort of vetted, I suppose, by because like my friend was nominated for an Emmy for his documentary, and absolutely no one called him to shoot anymore. Not anymore, but like uh because of it. But when he entered, he's a producer. When he entered rooms, and they would be like, "This is Emmy nominated so and so," they'd be like, "Oh, okay, yeah," and those initial questions wouldn't get asked anymore.
Mm.
Do you find that is kind of like how you finally get to work? Is you have to have kind of one of those external validations, and it's kind of a slog till there? Or did you have like a different approach up till that?
I think it's always a slog. I think
Yeah.
there's gatekeepers along the way. And so, because I started in documentaries, so in Australia, I did 10 years of documentaries, which I loved.
Fun.
They are great. And I got to go to some crazy places like North Korea. And, I was embedded with
Oh
the
yeah,
US
you were with the army
Army.
for a while, huh?
Yeah, I mean, like 3 days. So we won't pretend it's weeks.
That's a while. Still a while.
Yeah. Um, but I went to Afghanistan. I went to all sorts of places, and I loved it. And I was also doing, low budget Australian films that no one's really heard of, um, and music videos. And everyone told me when I tried to do a feature, "Oh, you don't do features, you do documentaries." So there was a bunch of gatekeepers there. And then when I'd done films, then I was in London, and then I was trying to get into TV, and they said, you can't do TV, you do films and documentaries. So there's always someone who's going to tell you, you've never done that, you can't do that. And so, yeah, I think it's just all about pushing on and not listening to those people, and just, but it is tough to try and get to that next sort of level. Yeah, that story was I didn't change my reel, and then I went back to Australia and did the Letdown series 2, which is a comedy series. And we were doing 10 pages a day in 10 hours with screaming kids, because it's a comedy about being parents. And then, yeah, I just had the word Netflix on my CV, and then I got interviews for other jobs. But then, I remember after that, I went for Harlots, which is a great British period drama. And they said, well, you've never done costume period drama before, so how on earth can you do candles?
Right.
And I said, well, here's a scene where I've done candles before, but it happens to be modern day, but there's a bunch of candles.
Right.
This whole scene was lit by candles, and they were like, oh, okay. And they gave me a break and gave me the job. And so I think sometimes it's about thinking beforehand. Actually, a director said this to me once: before you go to the interview, think about what they're going to have against you, and then come up with an argument.
Mm-hmm.
So, like, you've never done action films. How on earth do you know how to do action?
Well, that was going to be my follow-up question is how, just because we had touched on it earlier, how did you get Halo? And also, and then I have a follow-up question for that because I'm actually interested. But how did Halo end up on your plate if you're doing Handmaid's Tale and comedies?
Yes, I do love to do a variety of different things. So,
You and
um,
Toby.
yeah, that's it. Um, we must get bored easily, I think.
Yeah.
Um, I knew the director who I'd worked with her on a couple of dramas, and she's a friend of mine now and a great director. And she was doing block one of season two. So
Mhm.
she was doing the opening. And so she recommended me to do the finale.
Yeah.
Then I interviewed with the showrunner, and I think the producer on Handmaid's Tale had worked with the showrunner, and so she also recommended me. So it's, it's that thing of not only who do you know, but who knows you.
Yeah.
So it's kind of the word of mouth.
I will say I like I said, I enjoyed that show, but the second season did look a lot better. You guys did a much better job on that one.
It was fun to do. I mean, we had the flood in ours
Right.
um, at
It's
the
a lot of
very end.
CG.
So that was really fun. That was really fun to work out how they were going to move. And a lot of them were dancers. And so I'm not a gamer, so I didn't really know a lot about Halo. And so when we started, they give you kind of this boot camp and this is the world. And, it's sort of like 4 hours long seminar about what is Halo. And my director, who was American, who's very funny, was kind of like, oh my gosh, do I have to sit here through this whole thing?
Right. But
Um, but it was very helpful, I think, especially if you didn't know the world, because there's books and there's like so many things to that universe.
yeah, I didn't actually. I played the first one. I didn't own an Xbox when I was young, so I never played it either. So I think any of the like the hardcore fans were like, that's not what happened in the book, whatever. I was like, I don't know. I'm having fun. It's
Yeah.
and
Yeah.
what's that?
Well, I love to read the fan comments after I've done something like that.
Why would you do that to yourself?
I just love all the crazy comments about like he shouldn't take his helmet off.
Yeah.
I don't know. I just go down a rabbit hole of internet reading all these. My favorite one actually was someone had written, this show's too dark. I can't see it on my iPad in the park.
Give me a break. That's my new thing is like, and I get downvoted a lot for this online, but it's like sometimes it's you, sometimes it's the viewer's fault. I spent $9,000 on this TV. Yeah, well, HDR sometimes isn't the best implementation, and you need to black out the thing behind you. No, it's good. Also, I can't hear anything. What's your sound system? Well, it's just a TV, but still,
Yes.
sometimes it's the viewer's fault. They need to meet us halfway, please.
And sometimes, a lot of people, I mean, I'm that annoying person who goes around, to people's houses and says, your
Yep.
TV's on the wrong setting.
Yep.
Out of the box, your TV is on a terrible setting. And I think people like, I don't know, I feel like Reed Morano does a lot of this work of like, your TV shouldn't be set to whatever it is when it comes out the box. It should be, this. And I know on the TV here in the apartment I am in Wales, I was like, right, first thing I do is change, and there's a mode called filmmaker mode, and it says filmmaker mode as the filmmaker intended. It's like,
Still not right. They need to have someone like Reed, well, probably a bigger name if we're, but like, and I mean name in the public, not between us, but Reed's a big enough name for us, but Spielberg mode or something, just so that
yeah,
the audience goes, oh, okay, yeah, that one,
yeah,
and just instinctively gets drawn to it in terms, because yeah, I do the same thing at my house. I did the nerdiest thing. I got a color calibrator for because I do color work sometimes, and I did that to my TV.
there you go.
Had the
That's
thing. It
great.
just sent there on the Roku app and was just like, and it was like using printer lights. It was like +1 red, +1
Oh, great. That's a
green.
great,
Like,
I might do that. That sounds great. One
It's
of those little kind of spider things that you put on.
Don't get the spider though. Spider's bad. But I1, I don't know who makes it now, but yeah, I1 display. I think Technicolor bought them or something. But they're better. Everyone I've ever heard using the spider, including me, doesn't give accurate results for some reason.
Okay.
Couldn't tell you why.
No.
What was I gonna? Oh, we gotta get going here. I was gonna say what just because we're on the Halo thing. What's something that Halo taught you about cinematography that Handmaids didn't, and vice versa?
I mean, Halo taught me a lot about stunts and how long they take to do and how difficult they are. I mean, I actually love shooting stunts, and I would love to, do something like shoot a James Bond film, just putting it out there in the universe. Um, be the first woman to shoot a James Bond. I would love that.
Cool.
Yeah, that'd be really cool. But yeah, the stunt director was amazing, and just like trying to work out how we did all that stuff, and and they're on wires, and then Phil, who was the stunt director, he kind of suggested we do some of these like as one as where you stitch with wipes past the stunt person, and then you go back again, and then it's the real actor, and it looks seamless, and so it was kind of, I think it's fun to do all that stuff, but also work out what the heart of that story is. So it's not just like doof, doof, doof for the sake of, shooting some aliens or something, what the point of the stunt scene. And that was fun on Gangs of London this last season. I did the middle episodes, and I read the script, and we had kind of what they call a bottle episode.
Love a bottle episode.
It was yeah. And I read it and I just went, I have to do this. I have to shoot this because one of the main characters is pregnant. She's being chased around like a sort of abandoned office block by the assassins. And she has to give birth like you do. And so she finds a room, she gives birth, and then they're after her, and then she, she's crawling in the ceiling. It's like all the critics called it, Die Hard for Gangs.
Sure.
And then she gives birth to the placenta, and then, the head assassin turns up and she strangles him with the umbilical cord.
Hell yeah.
Yeah. And we shot that with 3 cameras, and then afterwards I just remember the crew going, and what did we just do? So I think sometimes it's just fun to do stuff like Halo that's, action, iconic shots of Master Chief. I think it's just fun. It's fun stuff.
This actually, sorry to addendum the question, but it was something I can't remember what I was talking to, because we were talking about replicating light. And obviously in something like Handmaid's Tale, whatever, you often are using available light, whatever, or you're replicating light on a stage or something. But it occurred to me, I can't remember who I was talking to, but it occurred to me that anytime you have a show where you're on set with like a blue screen or whatever, or it's just a VFX thing, especially if you have to shoot for VFX, you need to be way more precise about how you replicate light. And I feel like that's got to be such a wonderful education if you can figure that out,
But also, you're also free. Halo made me think, because I was so used to thinking, okay, the window's here, and the practicals on there, or whatever the real life, sort of based in real life situation it is. But it was like Halo was like, oh no, we're on another planet. How many suns are there?
Sure.
What's moving where? You could move the light outside the spaceship with the window. It was kind of like, it was actually completely freeing to think, how do we rethink that?
That prep phase must have been fun.
Yeah, that was good. And we actually got to go to Halo, which was Slovenia, but what that looked like and how you sort of controlled, because you'd seen it in his mind before that, so it was presented in a sort of idealized you know, Petzval lens kind of blurry way, or shift and tilt kind of thing. And then he actually got there. So then it was like, but then then you're in the real world. So you're back to sort of, you know, big bouncers and negative fill. And, but I think I'd never done sci-fi before. So it really taught me about, it's like unhooking your brain from reality in a way, which was really fun.
Yeah. Well, we'll have to have you come back and talk about those lessons.
Yeah.
At some point, because I've kept you a little over, but it was
That's
really
all right.
lovely talking to you. And yeah, like I said, I'd love to have you back on, especially when it's time to do more press or something, whatever the new movie is. We'll have you back on
Yeah.
for that.
Thank you so much for having me. You've had so many good people on. You've had Katie Goldschmidt, who's my friend.
The best.
She's wonderful.
Yeah, I was like, because I had her on previously. So
Yeah.
for that, I was just sitting there watching Last of Us, and then her name came up, and I went, I'll just text her. Welcome back on the show. She's like, yeah, you need screeners. I was like, you betcha. Yeah, it's a pleasure to add you to the list of illustrious guests.
Thank you. Thank you for having me.
Of course.
It's been great.
Frame and Reference is an Albot production, produced and edited by me, Kenny McMillan. If you'd like to support the podcast directly, you can do so by going to frameandrefpod.com and clicking on the Patreon button. It's always appreciated, and as always, thanks for listening.